Welcome back to Simply Satisfied. I am your host, Greg, here, and I have a special guest with me today, David Allen Brown, who he teaches people all about how to recognize and regulate their inner voices to live intentionally each day and manifest their goals. And I'm super excited for this talk because he's here to talk about his life work, but we're also going to talk about his story and how he just integrates all the background into what he does today. So welcome to the show, David Allen Brown.
Thanks, Greg. I'm so pleased to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. Like I said, I'm excited for this one. I probably read through your information so much. I was like, man, this guy sounds super, super interesting. I got to know more. So
I'll do my best.
that's why we're here today. So actually, the one thing I want to talk about first is I read a little bit something about your background, your kind of history and everything, and it says it had like a dark side. Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. Yeah, I think that, my story, like my whole life, which I just happened to recently write into a unpublished book, it really is a pattern of a pretty privileged, honestly, and empowered young adulthood. I did a lot of leadership work. I was really confident. I was traveling a lot. I was doing speaking and teaching and the rest. And then um, over the course of my adulthood, through a bunch of different circumstances, just kind of the way life is, just the way we sort of get caught in patterns, the way that we make some mistakes that we don't recognize or redeem ourselves for or find true forgiveness for. And so I went on a sort of long, slow process of a little bit just forgetting who I was, a little bit losing track of my purpose, a little bit just stuck in a sort of mediocrity that didn't feel quite right. And then in some relationships and some circumstances that really just kind of felt myself, the best way I can describe it is just sort of getting smaller and smaller and smaller, less of my true self and more of a sense of like, just doing what was expected of me, just trying to get through day to day, not really waking up with much enthusiasm. And being a little beat down by some pretty significant challenges, raising kids and those types of things, and we had our struggles. Then when COVID came, and we were all faced with a lot of looking in the mirror, and I was already on a pretty steep decline, and now all of a sudden I didn't have enough ways to be busy and distract myself. I didn't have enough ways to feel like there was a purpose or a call. And then it really started to turn. And I started to believe that I didn't really have much of a place, that I wasn't doing anything significant enough, that I wasn't really making a difference anymore. And that led to some pretty dangerous thoughts, like, if I can't figure out why I'm here, then maybe I don't need to be here, and a lot of shutting off of kind of feeling and connection and emotion. For me, depression wasn't sad all the time. For me, depression was not feeling anything for long periods of time, and really just becoming sort of desperate, because then it was, well, what would make you feel better? And not having the answer to that question, I don't know what would make me feel better. That became a little bit desperate. And a little dangerous, to be perfectly honest. And when I started to recognize what those thoughts were and what they were really called in the world, then I found myself a good therapist. I mean, I'd been in therapy before, but I actually found the right guy, and made a commitment that this time I was going to step into it completely honest from start to finish, that I wasn't going to hold anything back, that I wasn't going to try to go into therapy looking for the answer I wanted, and instead would confront all of the everything. And that started a turnaround for me. And so with help, I started to rediscover what were those things. Who am I really? Who do I really want to be?
Okay. And maybe you're still on that journey, but what kind of conclusion did you come to in that moment?
Well, a huge part of it, I mean, I think it was step by step, because part of what had happened at that point was just losing a real sense of any sort of worth. And so one of the very first things that we did, and he did really quite brilliantly, was though I couldn't see the relationships in my life that were reflecting positively, that were people who believed and trusted in me, he helped me Just see. And it took a while. Just go have coffee with that one friend from work. Just go sit for a little bit with that one person, who really eventually became my best friend. Just hear what they have to say. Realize they don't have to spend time with you. They're choosing to. Just accept those little graces as truth, and see if you can't start to breathe those in. So, one of the first things that happened through that process was being able to recognize and just listen. And of course, for me at the start, it came externally. And so he was very careful about choosing the voices I was listening to, and really had to work with me on getting me to believe what they were saying and even what they weren't saying. So that was a big one, rediscovering my worth. But I think the other big one that came along too was rediscovering my authenticity. I've was someone who was always outgoing, was always wanting to teach, was always wanting to give, was always wanting to be up in the front of the room and give presentations and help other people and coach. And I had really lost track of a lot of that. And through some stuff that we tracked down, had even um, uh, kind of crushed that. Not just from circumstance, but it's amazing what we can talk ourselves into sometimes. And
Yeah.
so I really got caught up in the notion that, well, humility is really what I value. Like, I should really just be humble and quiet, and I should really never make anybody feel small, and so I'm going to kind of just tamp it down, even just venerating these qualities that sure are also noble, but weren't authentically me. And so a big part of it was finding value and being willing to say, look, actually, people appreciate when I step up to the front. Oh, look, people do recognize me as a leader. Oh, people do like to hear my opinion on, and I started out small, like, movies and books I've read, but, now here I am on a podcast giving my sort of sense to anyone who will listen. And so the authenticity and the valuing who I was, that was the big second part. None of it happened quickly. I can assure you of that. But those were the two keys, and neither of them are complete either. By the way, my return to therapy was 4 years, maybe five now. It's still doing the work every day.
Yeah. That's awesome. And so the big two keys were worth and your authenticity. Now, someone once told me that you really don't figure out who you are until you know your worth.
Mm. Yeah, that's a lovely phrase.
um, and he was a salesman, and he was like, you'll either undersell yourself or oversell yourself until you know your actual worth.
Ah, interesting.
Um, now, I don't know how much you believe that or I believe that or whatever it is, but finding your worth, like you said, that was probably one of the first keys,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
There's a great Mark Twain quote: "The two most important days in a person's life are the day that they're born and the day that they find out why." And so it's a very similar thing, understanding in all of this craziness, and letting go of the external that might be trying to define for you where your place is, but finding internally what the worth, what the why. So yeah, I hear you. I'm with you.
What kind of challenges or what kind of questions did you have to ask yourself going through that process?
Phew. um, I think that I just said that phrase, it's so many external forces trying to tell us what worth is. And, one of the big things that happened in the middle with absolutely no regret is that I became the stay at home dad to two kids. And so I was in a non-traditional role by choice. And I respect that. Boy, back in the day when that was a forced role and people were in it that didn't want to be, boy, sorry about that, because your heart has to be in it. And mine was for a while, well, throughout, without a doubt. And being hyper focused on the daily life of two other people within a very confined system, while it has great value, one of the great revelations of therapy was I'm great at it. I'm proud to have done it. It's filled with love. It has a huge purpose in the world. I'm raising kids. And you know what? it's not who I am at my core being. Hiding in my house for 18 years and being focused on all of that, and really to the neglect of my creativity, my outgoingness, my leadership, my ability to help organizations, all the things that I do in personal development and spiritual development being set to the side. So your question was, what did you have to ask yourself? Well, who are you really, and how do you know, like, what is it that changes you from functioning to thriving, and can you recognize those things and believe in them? And so when I was like, oh, I mean, one of the things I do is speak, and I love to speak because I love the performing aspect of it. And I finally had to admit that, oh, and part of what I love about it is being in front of an audience and receiving all of that energy from the audience. Well, for a long time, I dismissed that completely as being an egotistical son of a, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I'm up there expecting all of this. Wait a minute. What's really true about that situation? Why does it give me energy? What is it about the exchange? Is it fulfilling my purpose? Where is that energy coming from? I'm not taking it from anyone. We're creating it. What's the reality of the spirituality of that moment? So, really, it becomes a lot of questions about what's real and not real for everyone else. Like, hey, I didn't have an income for 18 years because I wasn't the breadwinner. What, that can get to your heart if you let it, but that's not real. So it's, what really is real on a really uh, delightful, fundamental self-awareness way. The energy I receive when I'm interacting with other people is not fake. It's a real thing. And following those threads, the energy that when I'm doing this, when I'm doing that, wow. And I had to set aside a really amazing, rewarding part of my life, which was being a stay-at-home dad, and get real about, yeah, but what do I think I'm actually called here to do? And so that was a big part of the examination.
Wow. I bet that was tough.
it, you know, I'll, what's tough about it is starting again at
Yeah.
this point in my career with that 18-year hole in my resume, and letting people know, hey, I've found my core skills and talent and calling again, the three vital things about what you want to do in your career. And then still having to wonder if, I mean, money's real, our lives are real, the structure of our lives require these things, knowing, sensing that authenticity, and then still having to just keep stepping forth every day in faith, every day in an understanding of, right, this is the right thing to do, this is non-traditional, but it's so true. Just continuing to have to wrap myself into, we're doing the right thing,
Yeah.
promise. That's hard, because there are days I wake up and I look at an empty calendar, or I look at a not great spreadsheet today, and I think, are you sure? And I'm like, okay, let's do the work.
Yeah. So you found your worth, found your authenticity, and then what happened next?
Mm. Well, then what happened next was, you have to start looking around and saying, okay, so what are the circumstances and the relationships in your life? And are they supporting who your authentic self is, or are they detracting from it? And that's very hard too, especially when one of those is your primary relationship. I had been married for 23 years at the time. And you have to get really real and truthful about that too. And then you have to decide, okay, so how much work do we want to put into seeing if the relationship can be something that's mutually beneficial, that can evolve as I'm evolving, that is I don't want to say worth it, because it's always worth it, but at the same time, there is a little bit of a return on investment there, and everybody has to agree, yeah, we want to do the really hard work. And in a very amicable way, we sort of just decided to say, maybe we want to try being happy in a different way, because it's a long, hard road ahead, and maybe both of us are ready to try something different. And so, yeah, then came divorce, and that's a smack in the head. As amicable as it is, it's still one of the top 5 greatest life changes you can undergo. And so, massive amounts of growth and growth opportunity. And that's really how I saw it. Remember what I said before about, depression being not feeling anything. And
Hmm.
so all of a sudden, here's all of this change. And so the opportunity for huge emotional influx, just in ways that I hadn't experienced in years, and having to suddenly recognize what that was and understand how to deal with it and see it as a gift and be grateful for it, and then begin to regulate that and incorporate it into a way of living and emotion as this amazing facet of life that can lead us and help us and provide us with so many gifts. But honestly, I was like a little kid, after years of numbness, to suddenly, I won't go through the whole story, but lawyers are lawyers. And there was one point where I was just absolutely furious in a way that I hadn't maybe ever experienced in my life. And I was reaching out to trusted friends, like, what do you do? What do you do when you're this angry, and having to sort of relearn that capacity? I mean, it was a tremendous time of growth and understanding, and it became a really important foundation of what I would come to write and publish as the facets of life and how we use those voices moving forward. But I had to do it, and the universe was a little bit on a like on a crash course system for me. It sort of seemed like, it seemed a little bit like I kind of said, okay, I'm ready, bring me back to what it is I'm supposed to do. And they were like, God was sort of like, are you sure?
Are
And
you
then it just,
sure?
yeah. And they're like, okay. And then they just shot me out of this gun. And I had about 2 years of just super intense, like, just growth and experiential opportunity. So, yeah, it got pretty crazy when you open the door and you really say, yep, I'm ready. You better be ready.
Yeah. So it all kind of came really fast.
Seem to. I mean, obviously they're still ongoing, but part of it was, and I want to be really candid and make sure that listeners understand the divorce experience is different, I think, for almost every single person. And so the fact that I had done so much work prior to our separation meant that once the separation happened, there was I wasn't focusing on the relationship anymore. And so it really did prime me for, okay, so what is it that I need to learn, and what is it that you, meaning what I just call universal energy or spirit, need me to know. Yeah. And then it just came. I mean, there was a very quick relationship that happened that was a super big flash in the pan. The circumstances of it almost don't even matter, because as I learned so much over the course of those 5 months, I realized, oh, this isn't about that relationship at all. It's about, here's another thing to learn, here's another thing to experience. And yeah, it was exhausting and exhilarating, because it really was the answer to a prayer. Okay, show me who I can be. Show me what I'm supposed to be. Bring me back to life. And it was a little Frankenstein-esque, where it was like, okay, go.
Yeah.
That's what I asked for.
Okay. And so it's still ongoing. You're
Oh
still
yeah,
still
sure.
still going through everything. Now you mentioned a little bit ago uh these voices
Hmm. Right.
that you had or you have. What do you mean by voices?
Yeah, right. And I think it's what we all have. And I use voices because, as you could probably tell, I'm a very verbal person. I'm a writer. I love words. But I've always experienced that. When I was younger, I was aware that when I was sorting out situations, like I had a breakup or a friend had done me wrong or whatever, that I could have the conversation in my head to help sort through how I was feeling and what I wanted to do and what my emotions were, and etc. And I kind of grew out of it. I bought into a little bit of the sense of like, well, only crazy people talk to themselves and this and that. And it's like, okay, so I sort of let it go. And I'll tell you, I love this is a true story. So I was in my new apartment and uh, frustrated one day. Just woke up on the wrong side of the bed, just grumpy, and things aren't moving as fast as I want, or just kind of just slamming the door, putting the coffee mug down, the whole thing, being frustrated and just whatever. And I remember literally just like being in the shower and like the day's starting and what's going to happen today, and they're just being and just being kind of poked by this one side of me that was sort of like, so what are you going to do? How are you going to fix it? What's going to be better? And that's a real part of me. And then all of a sudden this reply came from within, and it was, all I really want right now is to be loved no matter what mood I'm in. And I heard it clear as a bell. And let's unpack that for a second. I was the only one in the room. like like so when I say voices, I do mean that there was a side of me which I call the actualized side, the doing side, the like, let's get on it side. Like, come on, okay, so how are we going to fix this? What is mine to do when I raise it to a higher level? And I hadn't been paying much attention to it, so it was a little spicy back in those days. Like, well, then come on, man, let's like just kind of that poking in the side. And then the other side that spoke up that day was what I think we also all have, which was that sort of emotional, back in the day, we used to call it inner child. I now have deemed it sort of this instinctual. It's both a physical and an instinctual emotional side that we have. And it's that side that's really just looking for peace and joy and love and understanding and it gets spicy too. It gets angry and frustrated and scared. But clearly in that moment, those were two voices. And I just recognized them as two really key and primary influences in the human experience. And I began to bring in other things I've heard, that the whole, like, only crazy people talk to yourself. Well, that was offset in college when you start studying, philosophy and Freud and ego and superego and id and all of the different and Jungian, psychology. And you realize, oh, right. No, these different aspects of our existence we've recognized for a long time, and we know how they fit in. And so I began to combine a lot of the things that I knew into this sense of, well, how do these conversations work, and what does each aspect of our human experience need and want, and how do they work together? And at that time, which was shortly into my kind of, I don't, rebirth sounds a little corny, but you know what I mean. There really were just, those two kind of in constant debate. The one side just sorting like, just give me peace and leave me alone. And the other side being, well, yeah, but we got to survive. Let's get going. And it was rough at the start. But that's what I mean. Now, there's a third voice, and we can talk about that. But that was the initial reminder of, hey, there's a way to find balance. And for me, it's voices. Other people might do it through a meditation or a diary or whatever. But I think that the fundamental aspects of what I call the human experience are there and start there.
Okay. So the first you talked about the first two voices. You mentioned the third, which
Yeah.
we'll get into, or
I'm for it, because really, when it comes down to how you move from really this human experience, and part of what, I mean, there was a period in my life where I like I said, I didn't have an emotional side at all. I just sort of discounted that and didn't think that was an important aspect of what I was doing. It was all about the getting things done and the rest, and this sort of nebulous sense of always just striving for peace. Peace was kind of my key thing, but that was a misnomer for me. And I went into an era, even, in my, I said there were many missteps. And one of them was I went into a very pious time, which is, if I'm holy enough, if I'm spiritual enough, if I'm meditating enough, then none of this stuff matters. I shouldn't have all these bad feelings. I shouldn't ever stumble, on the way to the
yeah.
grocery, have grumpy days. Well, I found that to be really, really false. And so I started to abandon the spiritual side too. And there's a very similar story that has to do with that relationship I was talking about before. And when that relationship started, and you have to realize it's my first romantic encounter in 24 years. So my brain is exploding at this point. And these two voices, pretty unregulated at that point, really kind of at war. And so there's the very afraid emotional side Like, this is insane. Like, how does this even work? Can I even fall in love at my age? That doesn't make any sense. And then this man, he was angry. This really feisty, like, doing side that was just like, this is stupid. Like, the dates we had been on, the experiences we had, like, those aren't even real. I was on vacation at the time when we met, so it's just like, oh, that's just dumb, you're too old, this doesn't work, just really starting to just pummel my instinctive side, just mean. And I don't know if anybody who's listening has ever just had that, where your just internal dialogue is just being just shitty to you. Like, you're just like, God, they're just pounding you. And so I'm starting to crumple. Like, I was literally in my chair, like, just, emotionally sort of protecting myself from this dialogue that was going on. And then all of a sudden there was just this third voice that just said very gently, like, hello. There was internally a quiet, and I sort of sat up, and it was again, hello. Then the voice said, I've got you. And that's significant in my life, because when my son was small, before we knew he needed glasses, and he needed them probably from birth, he used to have a moment where we would call him freezing up. And I mean toddler, like two, we'd see him at a party and he would stop moving, and we would be like, oh, he's stuck. And we would go, and I would scoop him up as his dad and put him close to me and whisper in his ear, like, I got you. And I would feel him relax in my arms, and it made everything all right. So all of a sudden, here was this voice in the midst of this raging that was going on between these other two sides of me. And it was honestly the voice of just a higher calling of spirit, just gently and peacefully waiting to interject and say, whatever it is that you are afraid of, whatever it is that you are angry about, know that there is a greater calling and a purpose here that will always keep you safe, and that you will always have access to the love and energy that is spirit, that surrounds you, that is part of you and part of the world that we live in. And that stopped the conflict. Everything, it didn't stop the relationship. It didn't stop the circumstances. It didn't uh, correct anything it didn't demand action. It didn't erase the fear. It became integrated into the conversation in such a way that I understood that these three aspects of the human experience are designed to integrate and work together, that they can support each other in such miraculous ways, including the fact that fear and anger and joy help guide our actions. And that when we're uncertain of what to do next, we can seek inspiration from something larger than ourselves. And that taking action can soothe and change mood, because we can't think our way out of depression. We have to take action in order to improve our mental health. And that the call to true mental health and self-love and peace and harmony comes from a higher place, because the universe wants us to be at our best in order to be making the difference and putting out the energy into the world. When I started thinking about all of the different ways, and this is the tip of the iceberg, that when you integrate these voices, when you recognize all three of them and put them into conversation, then suddenly we become the amazing being that we are. And that's how the third voice reappeared. And then there was quite a bit of work and research and working out and creating spreadsheets and doing just a lot of writing, and eventually developing to be like, okay, so what does that really mean? How do these voices integrate? What do they need from each other? How do you soothe them when they're spicy? How do you release judgment when anger isn't the emotion you wish you were feeling right now? Or even spirit can get frustrated and provide us with what we call a divine pull to get back to our purpose, to get back to our higher self, to get back to our self-love. So so that's those are the ongoing conversations I have. That continues to be how we do the work.
Okay. So
That's a lot. That was a big answer, but
no, that was good. That
yeah.
was good. So the three voices. run me through how each one, because you mentioned like the research and how to figuring out how to integrate them. Give me a quick rundown. You don't have to go into everything, years and years of research or whatever else, but give me a quick rundown on each one, how it is integrated or how it can be integrated well.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about them, and interrupt me because I'm going to do one at a time, and you tell me where I'm not being clear or what's intriguing to you, because I really want this to be a conversation. So let's start with that sort of emotional, instinctual kind of base core self. Um, a lot of this comes from true physiology. The human animal, being an evolved being in a world that's evolving much faster than what our human being is capable of, or what our brains are processing. And so it reverts a great deal to some very core and sometimes even primal responses through brain chemistry and brain understanding, and then the simple fight or flight needs that are instinctual. So, what I try to do with each part is give a sense of both what they need in order to simply function and to be an actualized being, and then what they want in order to sort of prosper and go to see. The convergence logo is the three circles, and in the middle it's a Venn diagram, and what we're
Okay.
striving for is that place where they're in communion, where they come together. So what we need from our emotional instinctual self is validation, a sense that there's a reason that we're here, that we make a difference in other people's lives. And we also need interaction, because there's a fundamental human need to receive not necessarily affirmation, but opportunity for discovery that only comes from interacting with other souls. So the need there is the validation and the interaction. The want of this instinctual side is comfort. It wants to know what's going to happen. It wants to know everything is going to be okay. It wants to know what's going to happen next, even in times when we can't actually say specifically what it is. And the other thing it wants is understanding, which is not understanding of what's outside. What the emotional and the instinctual self wants is that shower question. What I want is to be loved no matter how I'm feeling. What I want is a release of judgment and an acceptance that who I am and how I'm feeling and what's going on in this moment, as instinctual or base or lizard brain as it is part of the process, and it's okay, and I'm still going to be loved. So that's a really core. That's a bit of the core of the emotion.
What's the balance between what they want and what they need?
We need the needs are foundational, so we need those first in order to be able to get to what we want.
Okay.
The needs tend to come from a core understanding. It's almost like something we affirm for ourselves inside. But the wants, think about those for a second. Where does comfort come from? Instinctually, we can receive that with a certain level of faith from knowing that there's an unconditional and unlimited source of love that surrounds us at all times. So where does that come from? Oh, very handily, it can come from a developed sense of our divine self, from that third voice that comes in and says, oh, no matter what. It can come from meditation and interaction and study and faith and practice, whether it's religious practice or spiritual practice, whatever it is. That understanding, that acceptance of whatever's going on right now, I got you. Well, that comes from the actualized side. Okay, we're going to do today either the best that we can, or what it takes to heal and feel better, or we're going to take that action that helps soothe, whether it's a specific a thing. It can be ice cream for that matter, or it can be following through on that phone call finally, or it can be, okay, we're going to finally write that letter or give forgiveness or accept forgiveness in a very tangible way. So you see how these wants begin to come from the other aspects of our experience, needs being fundamental. So let's talk about that in another way. That actualized self. I talked about emotion needing interaction, which really to me is going out in the world and having the opportunity to have feeling and have reaction to whatever's happening. But the need of the actualized self, the doing self, is true relationship. And that's truly engaging with other people. Now, there's a whole range from intimate relationships to casual or even stranger relationships. But the actualized self feels a sense of worth when it's making an impact on other people. We've managed to distract ourselves in a lot of ways and say, oh, well, when I'm impacting supply chain, when I'm impacting political stories, when I'm impacting sports results, that's no. The foundational need of the actualized self is to know that they're making a difference in relationship with other people. So that's what they're heading out into the world to do. Now, what they want is purposeful interaction. And that inspiration often comes from a divine self, a knowing that whomever you're interacting with today, your job is to support them, be unconditional loving, be whatever it is that they need in that moment. And they also need affirmation that that interaction, even if it didn't feel quite right, it was maybe a learning opportunity instead of a loving opportunity, but that it's part of the system that comes from an emotional response. Oh, either that doesn't feel right, let's talk about it, or that felt great, do that again. So you see how in conversation, they're all sort of supporting each other. The spiritual self seems like it doesn't need anything, like it's just there, it's the divine, it's however you perceive the whatever is greater than yourself. And in fact, what the divine self needs is an invitation, because it's sitting there waiting patiently. And there's a famous phrase in a known spiritual text called A Course in Miracles that is, God is lonely without you. And that is without inviting and incorporating a higher power or a more divine thinking, then we're running on 2 out of 3 of our cylinders. We're not really tapping into what's inspirational, what's really our calling. And so what the spiritual self wants is the grace of being invited, of forgiveness, of moving past the physical or the emotional and seeing bigger picture. What the divine wants is forgiveness, and forgiveness of ourselves first and foremost, that in fact we are human beings. That comes from what I was saying before, that notion of, oh, yeah, if I was divine enough, if I was engaged enough, that I would be perfect, it would all be fine. Ugh, crap. Guess what? I'm a human. Oh, I finally had to come back to, I'm not perfect. It was a surprise to me too. Like, I get it, but that's, so this forgiveness is part of what the spiritual side wants. And then of course, what the spiritual side wants, I keep coming back to this theme, we're here wherever we are because we are with the other spirits that are here. It wants engagement. It wants us to step forth and be the light. It wants us to be the challenge. It wants us to be in other people's life, to give them the opportunity to grow and do great things. And that doesn't always mean that, you're the divine inspiration or you're the guru. You might be the person who's cutting someone off in traffic today so that they can learn the lesson of being patient and forgiving you for cutting off in traffic. So, it's not about specific, oh, well, then I need to go sit on the mountain, or, oh, I need to go and write the book. No, it's, I need to be conscientious and conscious in my daily life so that I know that I'm affecting other people around me. And then we grow into how do we incorporate doing that in a loving way as often as we possibly can.
Yeah. And so it leads to what we were talking about earlier, was living with intentionality,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
it's kind of like fully being aligned with who you are, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
that authenticity. And, one of the primary covenants is non-judgment. And
Hmm.
so some of it really is allowing whichever voice can do it at the time to just provide that grace of, you're doing the best you can. And we're certain this is part of a bigger plan. and we know that we're exactly in the right place at exactly the right time, and what you're feeling is important because it's going to motivate you or heal you or teach you. And and tomorrow or in a minute you're going to do the next thing, the next best thing for you. And so, yeah, the authenticity of being your true self, and that tends to come from a release of judgment.
Release of judgment. I think that's a big one. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a big one that a lot of people, I mean, for the longest time, and you talked about your history as well, for the longest time, I was not aware on how judgmental I was of others and myself,
Okay.
you know?
Yeah.
And like exactly what you're talking about, that release of judgment, it doesn't happen right away.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So how
it's
did
a
you
long
begin to,
road.
yeah, how did you start to cultivate the awareness that that was happening for you?
Um,
The judgment
so
part.
the judgment part for me,
Yeah.
it was, when every interview or every, group circle, when you're meeting new people, they all ask the same question is what's your greatest strength? What's your greatest weakness? Right. And for me, it was the same answer from the time I was 15 to the time I was 26, which was I care way too much what people think of me.
Oh, okay.
And actually, it wasn't me who helped me on my path to uh, releasing judgment or releasing self-judgment. It was somebody else who said, "You care so much of what other people think of you because you care too much about what you think of you."
Mm, wow.
And I was like, "Huh." And he pointed out some other things. He pointed out the fact that like people really aren't thinking about me as much as I think they are.
Yeah.
Um, you know, but
Right.
it was going down that road to be able to realize that I was judging myself so harshly. Like you talked about, I was always striving for more. I was striving for this happiness or this peace or this prosperity that like it was always far off in the distance. And I never embraced the voice like you're talking about that said, "Hey, you're okay where you're at. You're good. Like you've made it so far already." I just never looked back to be like, "Oh yeah, that's all, how far I've made it." I was always focused forward. I fell hard into the hustle culture and the grind and everything else, and it wasn't until I had to sit, I didn't choose to. I had to sit
Yeah.
with it all
Okay.
and find that peace and find that in the moment. And that's when I realized that all of this judgment puts me in a spot where I am not in this moment. And I had to release it. And like I said, it was a long road. It was a long road. I had to listen to like I'm gonna steal your term. I had to listen to my own voices. I had to get some of those voices out of my head. I had to write it down. I had to do some really deep reflection. I had to have conversations with people that I really didn't want to have.
Yeah.
um, and I had to start embracing, like we were just talking about. I had to start embracing what was possible, and
Mhm.
give that whatever you want to call it, God, the universe, infinite intelligence. I had to give it that invitation. I had to say, okay, this is where I want to go. This is what's going on. Not bring me there, but like, what's the path? Kind of open the door and be like, okay, I'm ready for you now.
Right. Right. And I think part of what's intriguing about everything we've been talking about, which sounds so complicated on a podcast that's about being simple, is that we can both get to these places where when the light bulbs came on, like I just heard you talk about, when you were forced to sit and think it through, the the clarity and the simplicity of those truths, releasing judgment, for example, or inviting a higher power in, the call to forgiveness, the need for self love and recognizing self worth. All of the things we're wrapping around these that sound so complicated, but those basics really are simple. And sometimes, whether you're just starting out or you're well on your journey, sometimes finding that one simple mantra or phrase or temporary tattoos I was using for a while, or red string around your wrist or sign on the wall, just find that one simple thing.
See,
The word.
I did the real tattoos. I didn't do temporary. I
Okay.
did
There
the
you go. I may get there because I haven't found the one. That's the thing. Like one week I need be here now,
My
and
whole
then next week I need love yourself.
my whole forearms are covered in like inspirational sayings and mantras and daily devotionals. And
Beautiful.
I just look down and it's daily reminders of like, oh
And there
yeah.
they are. Yeah. And so help me out here. I bet they're just like simple, just straightforward truths. And I guess that's what I'm just trying to remind everybody who's listening is, wow, this seems complicated. And I do a lot of overthinking, and that's a lot of conversation and this, that, and the other. But all of those things get us, you and me, Greg, and people listening, to these simple truths that become our bellwether. We when we need them most, we look down, or we just find that reminder, and it's sometimes just that simple. Oh, be grateful here, and that's
Hmm.
all it takes. Oh, be present here, and that's all it takes. Oh, forgive. Um, and sometimes it's my my therapist eventually convinced me that when those voices are spicy, sometimes you just gotta smack them down. Just be like, you know what, not helpful. Sometimes that's as simple as it is. Like, I'm shutting you off.
Yeah.
Go sit in the corner. But that's the thing. As complicated as this all seems, really does come down to just understanding the simple things that put us back into our strength and into our peace and into whatever it is we want.
So where does this journey have you going now? What is the end goal, or where are you aligned with now?
Oh, well, I'm going to become Oprah's best friend, I think is the next thing. I, you know, I, for a year, this, we talked about these sort of things like that. I kind of self smushed down, and for years, I detested the phrase motivational speaker. It
Hmm.
just gave me these sort of willy vibes, and like the whole thing, and so I don't use that phrase, but so I've published an online course that people can be a part of, and that really dives into the ins and outs of what we were talking about, and I want people to really experience how that can be changing, and join a community of us who are like, while you're doing the course, because it's no small feat, we can meet, and we can be on Zoom, and we can coach each other and really find this actualized self. Then I'd love to start doing that in person more and more, longer form workshops, really getting a chance for people to talk about what it is that they're experiencing and going through, and overcoming hurdles and roadblocks. I have a memoir manuscript form that I'd love to have published someday. It's not really a companion piece. I don't. It all leads to this. It's a little bit of the answer of like how I know what I know,
Yeah.
because I'm not ordained. I'm not a PhD. This hasn't been my whole life, career and work. This is me, like so many people listening who had a life that resembles a lot of people's lives, that just became a little bit smaller and smaller and smaller, and needed to be rediscovered. So I'd love to talk to people about how that resonates, whether or not they have some of the same sensations I have, that need to reemerge, to invite spirit in, to be bigger than themselves. Um, I do travel and speak regularly. I do consult and speak at progressive congregations like Unities and spiritual centers for spiritual living. I do really keep a high concept understanding of the ability of energy dynamics and higher power to work in our lives, and really set aside any sort of religious connotation to that. So it took me a year to develop and publish. Well, and the book isn't published, but to create that content. And so now I'm going anywhere people invite me, and saying, let's talk about it, and then experience it together, and see if this type of internal conversation can make a difference for people. I really, because I think it can, and partly because it has me. There are plenty of days I work up, and with anxiety, just straight out, with fear, and I've made big changes lately, and I've taken some big leaps forward, and I still have that big hole in my resume, I'm diving into what I think I'm being called to do, and I'm really relying on you and everybody listening to say, yeah, I think you're onto something. Why don't you come talk to us about it here or there, even one on one? So that's what I'm doing, putting myself out there and saying, let's see where this goes.
That's amazing. Has the
Yes,
has
and scary.
well has I was just about to say, has the risk been worth it so far?
Here's what I know, which is that when I get a chance to spend an hour like this, and you ask me those questions, and I find that I'm talking way too much because the truth of it just starts to come through me.
Hmm.
And I'm so eager to share it. It feels so right. It feels so capital I inspired that I'll ride on this interaction with you, Greg, for however long I can, because I don't know what worth is as far as career and stability and money and all of those sorts of things. But I certainly know the extraordinary feeling of going to bed tonight, being like, "Oh, I answered the call today," and so is it worth it? Holy, oh, no pun intended. Yeah, it sure is. It sure is. And that's a feeling that I wish on everybody who's listening. To end your day knowing that you did what you were meant to do, capital M, capital T, capital D, then, there's nothing quite like that.
Yeah. Now, as we start to wrap up the show, I have one final question for you. And actually, I think you're going to enjoy this question, but you're also might have a different twist on it from a lot of people. And the reason I say that is I think you're going to look at it and be like, everything has happened for a reason, so I can't really answer that question. And the question is, what is something, just one thing, you wish you would have learned earlier in life?
I think that one of the most important things that authenticity brought for me late in life was an understanding that the only person who can make me believe that I am worthy and worth it is myself. And I mean that on both sides of the coin. One is it's never going to come from outside. I can start there. I was taught, remember, I said that story. I was taught to listen to voices to remind me. But that was part of a process of being like, okay, so if they believe it, can you start to believe it too? Had to come from within. That was where the true healing was. But the other side of that coin is the being in denial of your worth and who you are and what you feel and who you love and how you enact in the world. If if you haven't done that, that will hold you back like nothing else in the universe can hold you back. It will stymie you consciously and subconsciously in ways that almost made my journey down into depression inevitable, because there was a barrier there between my authentic self and my life that hadn't been removed, that hadn't been erased by self love. And it became my undoing. So I wish I had known not just how empowering it is to accept my worth and to love myself, but how unbelievably damaging it is until you do that for yourself. That's what I wish I had
Wow, I just got the chills.
known.
Wow, that was some truth right there.
That I you saw me take that deep breath and just
Yeah,
wait for it, and yeah, I got a little bit of chill right now myself too. I think I'm with you. Sometimes that capital T truth just comes through. Thank you so much for the opportunity to feel that and express that today.
of
Like
course.
I've said it how many times, it's about being in a relationship. This is why. Because in this format, in this world that we're in right now, in the ways that we communicate, in podcasts, if you think about the concept of it, it's
Yeah.
still how we interact, and it's what brings out truth in us. And that would be my kind of parting reminder. You're meant to interact with other people in order to enact your purpose in life. And shoo, I was scared to death of it for a long time, in spite of being this big, empowered, Midwest, privileged white guy.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, And so authenticity brought me back to, I bet it'll be okay.
Well, and that's why I started this show. I believe in the power of interaction. I believe in the power of storytelling. I believe in the power of people's stories, the differences and the similarities and everything else. And that's the main reason I started this all, was to bring this feeling, right?
Right. Right.
Now,
That's awesome.
David, do you have anything else that you want to tell the listeners before we end today?
No, I get to these points and I get slightly embarrassed. Like I know I've been prattling on. I mean, I guess the only thing is that let's continue the interaction. I mean, it's davidallenbrown.com. The only trick there is the middle name, ALAN, is how I spell it, not two L's, not what ALAN, but davidallenbrown.com. You can track me down. You can send me messages. We can start a dialogue in any number of ways. And it's my calling. And yeah, I think there's going to become a more and more expansive way that this works, and prosperity and the rest. But none of it will happen if we don't continue the dialogue. So the last thing I would say is, give me the opportunity to give you the opportunity, the listener and yourself, to just keep working with each other and loving each other.
Yeah. And for everybody listening, I'm going to put all of David's information, his website, his socials, all of that's going to go in the show notes, so you guys will be able to get in touch with him. David, thank you so much for doing this. Like,
I love this so much, and I appreciate the audience that you've brought together.
this is awesome. This is a really good interaction, and I had a lot of fun. I hope you did too.
Oh, me
So
too.
thank you so much. And for everybody listening, as always, keep smiling, keep striving, and I will catch you guys in the next episode.